Hidden knowledge. The idea of a knowledge which surpasses all ordinary human knowledge and is inaccessible to ordinary people, but which exists somewhere and belongs to somebody, permeates the history of thought in mankind from the remotest of periods. According to memorials of the past, a knowledge quite different from ours formed the essence and content of human thought at those times when, according to other opinions, humanity differed very little, or did not differ at all from animals. Hidden knowledge is therefore sometimes called ancient knowledge, but this, however, does not explain anything. It must be noted that all religions, all myths, all beliefs, all popular heroic legends of all peoples and all countries, are based upon the recognition of the existence sometime and somewhere of a knowledge far superior to the knowledge we possess or can possess. To a considerable degree, the content of all religions and myths consists of symbolic forms, which represent attempts to transmit the idea of this hidden knowledge. On the other hand, nothing demonstrates so clearly the weakness of human thought or human imagination as existing ideas on the content of hidden knowledge. The word, the concept, the idea, the expectation, exists, but there are no definite concrete forms of percept connected with this idea. The idea itself has to be dug out with great difficulty from beneath mountains of lies, both intentional and unintentional. From deception and self-deception, and from naive attempts to present, in intelligible forms adopted from ordinary life, that which in its very nature can have no resemblance to them. The work of finding traces of ancient or hidden knowledge, or even hints of its existence, resembles the work of archaeologists looking for traces of some ancient and forgotten civilization. Finding them buried beneath several strata of cemeteries left by people who have since lived in that place, separated possibly by thousands of years, and unaware of each other's existence. On every occasion, when an investigator stumbles upon the attempts to express in one way or another the content of hidden knowledge, they invariably see the same thing, namely, the striking poverty of human imagination in the face of this idea. Humanity in the face of the concepts of hidden knowledge reminds us of the people in fairy tales who are promised by some goddess, fairy, or magician that they will be given whatever they desire on condition that they say exactly what it is that they want. Then what happens next in fairy tales is that people do not know what to ask for. In some cases, the fairy or magician offers to grant as many as 3 wishes, but even this is of no use. In all fairy tales of all periods and peoples, individuals get hopelessly lost when confronted with the question of what they want and what they would like to have. They seem quite unable to determine and formulate their wish. Either at that moment they remember only some small, unimportant desire, or they express several contradictory wishes, which cancel one another out. Otherwise, as in the Pushkin tale of the fisherman and the fish, they are unable to keep within the bounds of possible things, and always wishing for more and more, end up attempting to subjugate higher forces, not being conscious of the poverty of their own powers and capacities. So again they fall, again they lose all that they have acquired, because they themselves do not clearly know what it is that they want. In a jocular form, this idea of the difficulty of the formulation of desires, and of folks' rare success at it, is set forth in an Indian tale. A beggar, who was born blind, led a single life, and lived upon the charity of his neighbors, was long and incessantly assailing a particular deity with his prayers. The latter was at last moved by this continual devotion, but fearing that this votary might not be easily satisfied, took care to bind him, by an oath, to ask for no more than a single blessing. It puzzled the beggar for a long time, but his professional ingenuity at last came to his aid. "I hasten to obey thy behest, generous Lord," quoth he, "and this solitary boon is all that I ask at thy hands. Namely, that I should live to see the grandchild of my grandchild playing in a 7-storied palace, and helped by a train of attendants to his meal of milk and rice, out of a golden cup." The beggar concluded by expressing his hope that he had not exceeded the limit of a single wish vouchsafed to him. The deity saw that he had been fairly done, for though singular in form, what the boon asked for comprised the manifold blessings of health, wealth, long life, restoration of sight, marriage and progeny. For the very admiration of his devotees' astuteness and consuming tact, if not in fulfillment of his plighted word, the deity felt bound to grant him what he had asked for. See Indian Tales, published by G. Anattā and Co., Madras 1920, page 134. In the legend of Solomon, 1 Kings 3, verses 5-15, we find an explanation of these tales, an explanation of what it is that mankind can receive, if only it knows what to ask for. In Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I should give thee." And Solomon said, "I am but a little child. I know not how to go out, or how to come in, and thy servant is in the midst of thy people. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad." And the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, "Because thou hast asked this thing, and not asked for thyself a long life, neither hast asked for riches for thyself, nor hast asked for the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise unto thee. And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, and I will lengthen thy days." The idea of hidden knowledge and the possibility of finding it after a long and arduous search is the content of the legend of the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail, the cup from which Christ drank, or the platter from which Christ ate, at the Last Supper, and in which Joseph of Arimathea collected Christ's blood, was according to a medieval legend brought to England. To those who saw it, the Grail gave immortality and eternal youth, but it had to be guarded, only by people perfectly pure in heart. If anyone approached it who was not pure enough, the Grail disappeared. On this followed the legend of the quest of the Holy Grail by chaste knights. Only the 3 knights of King Arthur succeeded in seeing the Grail. Many tales and myths, those of the Golden Fleece, the Firebird, of Russian folklore, Aladdin's lamp, and those about secret riches and treasures guarded by dragons or other monsters, serve to express the relation of humankind to hidden knowledge. All views on life are divided into 2 categories on this point. There are concepts of the world which are entirely based upon the idea that we live in a house in which there is some secret, some buried treasure, some hidden store of precious things that somebody someday may find, and which occasionally has in fact been found. Then, from this point of view, the whole aim and the meaning of life consists of the search for this treasure, because without it all the rest has no value. Then there are other theories and systems in which there is no idea of a treasure trove, for which all alike is visible and clear, or all alike remains invisible and obscure. If in our time theories of the latter kind, that is of those who deny the possibility of hidden knowledge, have become predominant, so we must not forget that they have become so only very recently, and only among a small, although very noisy part of humanity. The vast majority of people still believe in fairy tales, and believe that there are moments when those fairy tales become reality. However, it is our grave misfortune that at those moments at which something new and unknown becomes possible, we do not know what we want, and the opportunity which suddenly appeared, just as suddenly disappears. Humanity is conscious of being surrounded by the wall of the unknown, and at the same time believes that they can get through the wall because others have got through it previously. We cannot, however, imagine, or imagine very vaguely, what we would like to find there, or what it means to possess such knowledge. It does not occur to us that people can be in different relations to the unknown. The unknown is not known, but the unknown may be of different kinds, just as it is in ordinary life. A person might not have precise knowledge of a particular thing, but they may think and make judgments, even suppositions about it. They may conjecture and foresee it to such a degree of correctness and accuracy that their actions and expectations in relation to what is unknown in this particular case may be almost correct. In exactly the same way, with regard to the great unknown, one may be in different relations to it. They may form more correct or less correct suppositions about it. Or they may make no suppositions at all. They could even forget about the very existence of the unknown altogether. In the latter case, when they make no suppositions or forget about the existence of the unknown, then even what is possible in other cases, that is the accidental coincidence of conjectures or speculations with the unknown reality, becomes impossible. In this incapacity of humanity to imagine what lies beyond the wall of the known and the possible, lies their chief tragedy. In this lies the reason why so much remains hidden from us, and why there are so many questions to which we can never find answers. In the history of human thought there are many attempts to define the limits of possible knowledge. But there are no interesting attempts to conceive what the extension of these limits might mean, and where it could necessarily lead. Such an assertion may seem an intentional paradox. People clamor so loudly and so often about the unlimited possibilities of knowledge, about the immense horizons opening before science, whereas in actual fact all these unlimited possibilities are limited by the five senses of sight, hearing, smell, touch and taste, plus the capacity of reasoning and comparing beyond which the human intellect can never go. We do not take sufficient account of this circumstance or forget about it, and this explains why we are at such a loss when we want to define ordinary knowledge, possible knowledge and hidden knowledge, or the differences between them. In all myths and fairy tales we find the idea of magic, witchcraft and sorcery, which, as we come nearer to our own period, takes the form of spiritualism, occultism and the like. But even people who believe in those words understand very imperfectly what they really mean, and in what respect the knowledge of a magician or an occultist differs from the knowledge of an ordinary person. Therefore, all attempts to create a theory of magical knowledge end in failure. The result is something indefinite and, though impossible, not fantastic, because the magician usually appears as an ordinary individual endowed with some exaggerated faculties in one direction. The exaggeration of anything, on already long-known lines, cannot create something fantastic. Even if miraculous knowledge is an approach to knowledge of the unknown, people do not know how to approach the miraculous. In this they are greatly hindered by the interface of pseudo-occult literature, which often strives to abolish the divisions mentioned herein, and prove the unity of scientific and occult knowledge. Thus, in such literature, one often finds assertions that magic or magical knowledge is nothing but knowledge which is in advance of its time. For instance, it has been said that medieval monks may have had some knowledge of electricity. For their times this was magic. For us it ceases to be magic, and what may appear magical for us would therefore cease to be magic for future generations. Such an assertion is arbitrary, and in destroying the necessary divisions, it prevents us from finding and establishing a right attitude towards facts. Magical or occult knowledge is knowledge based upon senses which surpass our basic five senses, and upon the capacity for thinking which surpasses ordinary thinking. But it is knowledge translated into ordinary logical language, if that is possible, or in as far as it is possible. In speaking of ordinary knowledge, it is necessary to repeat that though the content of knowledge is not constant, that is, though it changes and grows, it always grows along definite and strictly fixed lines. All scientific method, all apparatus, all instruments and appliances are nothing but improvements upon, and a broadening of the five senses. Whereas mathematics, and all possible calculations, are nothing but the broadening of an ordinary capacity of comparison, judgment, and the drawing of conclusions. At the same time, however, some mathematical constructions go so far beyond the realm of ordinary knowledge as to lose any connection with it. Mathematics finds such relations or magnitudes and relations of relations as have equivalents in the physical world we observe. But we are unable to make use of these mathematical attainments because in all of our observations and reasonings we are bound by the five senses and the laws of logic. In every historical period, human knowledge, that is to say ordinary knowledge or the known accepted knowledge, embraced a definite cycle of observations and the deductions made from them. As time went on, this cycle grew larger but, if it may be so expressed, it always remained on the same level. It never rose above it. Believing in the possibility and existence of hidden knowledge, people always ascribed new properties to it, always regarded it as rising above the plane of ordinary knowledge, and stretching beyond the limits of their five senses. This is the true meaning of any hidden knowledge of magic, of miraculous knowledge, and so on. If we take away from hidden knowledge the idea that it goes beyond the five senses, it will lose all meaning and importance. If taking all this into consideration we undertake a survey of the history of human thought in relation to the miraculous, we might find material for ascertaining the possible content of the unknown. This should be possible because in spite of all the poverty of its imagination, and the divergence of its attempts, humanity has guessed some things correctly. Such a summary of the aspirations of humankind to penetrate the realm of the incomprehensible and the mysterious is particularly interesting at the present time, when the psychological study of man has recognized the reality of states of consciousness that were long considered pathological and have admitted their cognitive value. That is to say, the fact that in these states of consciousness people are able to know what they cannot know in ordinary states. But this study has today come to a standstill and gone no further. It had to be recognized that, remaining on scientific ground, it is impossible to regard the ordinary state of consciousness, in which we are capable of logical thinking, as the only one possible, and the clearest. On the contrary, it was established that in other states of consciousness, which are rare, and have been studied very little, we can learn and understand what we cannot understand in any ordinary state of consciousness. This in turn has served to establish the fact that any ordinary state of consciousness is only a particular instance of consciousness, and that our ordinary concept of the world is only a particular instance of the concept of the world. The study of these unusual, rare and exceptional states of humanity has established a certain unity, a certain connectedness and consecutiveness, and an utterly illogical logic in the content of the so-called mystical states of consciousness. At this point, however, the study of mystical states of consciousness came to a standstill and has never progressed further. It is difficult to describe a mystical state of consciousness by means of ordinary psychological terminology. Judging by outward signs, such a state has much in common with somnambulistic and psychopathological states. There is nothing new about establishing the cognitive value of mystical states of consciousness. This fact is new only to science. The reality and value of mystical states of consciousness have been and are acknowledged by every religion, without exception, which exists or has ever existed. According to the definition of the theologians of the Orthodox Church, mystical states of consciousness cannot disclose or add new dogmas, but they disclose and explain the content of dogmas which are already known by revelation. It is evident from this that mystical states of consciousness are not opposed to basic revelation, but are, as it were, regarded as phenomena of the same nature, but of less power. They can explain dogmas given by revelation, but cannot add new dogmas. Unfortunately, theological interpretations always keep within the bounds of dogmas and canonical rules of a particular religion. They cannot overstep these bounds because of their very nature. Regarding science, it has shown little interest in mysticism, assigning it to a sphere of pathology, or at best to a sphere of the imagination. The word mysticism is used in very different senses, for instance in the sense of a certain kind of theory or teaching. According to interpretation, the word mysticism includes all those teachings and beliefs concerning life beyond the grave, the soul, spirits, hidden forces in men, and divinity, which do not enter into the ordinary and recognized religious teachings. The use of this word, however, in such a sense is quite wrong, since its fundamental meaning is thus destroyed. Consequently, the word mysticism should be used only in its psychological sense, that is, in the sense of special states of consciousness and ideas and concepts of the world, directly resulting from these states. An examination of what is known of mysticism and mystical states of consciousness is of great interest in connection with the idea of hidden knowledge. If we follow neither the religious nor the scientific view but try to compare descriptions of the mystical experiences of people of entirely different races, different periods and different cultures, we find a striking resemblance among these descriptions. They can in no way be described by similarity of preparation or by resemblance in ways of thinking and feeling. In mystical states, utterly different people in completely different conditions learn one and the same thing, and what is even more striking, in mystical states there is no difference of religions. All the experiences are absolutely identical. The difference may be only in the language and form of the description. In the mysticism of different countries and different peoples, the same images, the same discoveries are invariably repeated. In fact, there may be enough of this material upon which to build a new synthetic religion, but religions are not built by reason. Mystical experiences are intelligible only in mystical states. All that we can get from an intellectual study of mystical states will be an approximation to, a hint of, a certain understanding. Mysticism is entirely emotional, made up of subtle, incommunicable sensations, which are even more incapable of verbal expression and logical definition than are things such as sound or color and line. In relation to the idea of hidden knowledge, mysticism can be regarded as a breaking through of hidden knowledge into our consciousness. This does not, however, mean that all mystics invariably recognize the existence of hidden knowledge and the possibility of acquiring it through study and work. For many mystics, their experiences are an act of grace, a gift of God, and from their point of view, no knowledge can ever lead people to this grace or make the acquisition of it easier. Thus, from one point of view, mysticism could not exist without hidden knowledge, and the idea of hidden knowledge could not be known without mysticism. From the other point of view, the idea of hidden knowledge which is possessed by somebody or other and can be found by intellectual means is unnecessary for mysticism. For the whole of knowledge is contained in the soul of men, and mysticism is the way to this knowledge and the way to God. In view of this dual attitude of mysticism towards hidden knowledge, it is necessary to make a distinction between these two ideas. Hidden knowledge is an idea that does not fit into any other idea. If the existence of hidden knowledge is admitted, it is admitted as belonging to certain people, but to people whom we do not know, to an inner circle of humanity. According to this idea, humanity is regarded as two concentric circles. All humanity which we know, and to which we belong, forms the outer circle. All the history of humanity that we know is the history of the outer circle. But within this circle there is another, of which men of the outer circle know nothing, and the existence of which they only sometimes dimly suspect. Although the life of the outer circle, in its most imperfect manifestations, and in particular its evolution, is guided by the inner circle. The inner or the esoteric circle forms as it were a life within a life, a mystery, a secret in the life of humanity. The outer or exoteric humanity, to which we all belong, is like the leaves on a tree that change each year. In spite of this, they consider themselves the center of life, not understanding that the tree has a trunk and roots as well, and that aside from leaves, it bears fruit and flowers. The esoteric circle is, as it were, humanity within humanity, and is the cerebellum, or rather the immortal soul, of humanity, where all the attainments, all the results, all the achievements of all cultures and all civilizations are preserved. One can look at the question from another angle, and try to find in man himself an analogy with the relation between the esoteric and the exoteric circles of humanity. Such an analogy can be found. It consists in the relation of the brain to the rest of the human body. If we take the human organism and examine the relation of the higher or the nobler tissues, which is to say, mainly the nerves and our brain matter, to other tissues of the organism, muscle tissues, connective tissue, the cells of the skin, and so on, we find an almost complete analogy with the relation of the inner circle to the outer. One of the most mysterious phenomena in the life of a human organism is the life history of brain cells. It has been more or less established through science, and can be accepted as fact, that brain cells do not multiply like the cells of other tissues. According to one theory, brain cells all appear at a very early age. According to another, they grow in number until our organism has reached the age of about 12. But how they grow and out of what they grow remains unknown. Reasoning logically, science ought to have recognized brain cells as immortal in comparison with other cells. It is true that they die in the end, but they die only once, so to speak, whereas the others die, in multiplying, hundreds and perhaps even thousands of times in the course of a year. This is almost all that can be said about brain cells, if we remain on recognized scientific ground. But what is accepted is far from being sufficient for the understanding of the nature of the life of brain cells. Too many facts have to be ignored before it becomes possible to accept the theory of a permanent stock of brain cells, which only diminish and diminish further. This theory of a permanent stock completely disagrees with the other theory, according to which brain cells perish, or are burnt up in great numbers at every thought process, particularly during intense mental work. If it were so, no matter how many there are, they would not last long. Bearing this in mind, we are forced to admit that the life of brain cells still remains unexplained and very mysterious. Though it is not recognized by science, the life of cells is very short, and the replacement of old cells by new ones in a normal organism proceeds continually and may even be increased. It does not enter into the scope of this discussion to establish how this proposition can be proven. For existing scientific methods, any observation of the life of individual cells in the human organism presents almost insurmountable difficulties. However, if reasoning purely by analogy, we suppose that brain cells must be born from something similar to them, and if at the same time we take it as proven that brain cells do not multiply, then we must assume that they need to evolve from some other cells. The possibility of the regeneration or evolution and transformation of one kind of cell into another kind is definitely established. For all cells of an organism develop from one parent cell. The only question is, from just what kind of cells can brain cells evolve? Science cannot answer this question. One can only say that if cells of a certain kind regenerate into brain cells, then by this very fact, they disappear from their former plane, leave the world of their kin, or die on one plane, and are reborn on another, higher plane. Just as the egg of a butterfly, in becoming a caterpillar, dies as an egg, and ceases to be an egg. As a caterpillar becoming a chrysalis, it dies as a caterpillar, ceases to be a caterpillar, and as a chrysalis, becoming a butterfly, dies as a chrysalis, ceases to be a chrysalis. That is, it leaves the world of its own kin, and passes to another plane of being. Similarly, brain cells, in passing to another plane of being, cease to be what they were before, die on their former plane of being, and begin to live on a different plane of being. On this new level, while remaining invisible and unknown, they govern the life of other cells, whether in their own interests, or in the interest of the whole organism. Part of their activity consists of finding among the more evolved tissue cells, those which are capable of evolving into more brain cells, because brain cells do not multiply by themselves. Thus we find in the human organism a complete analogy with the relation of the inner circle to the outer circle of humanity. If these two circles exist,